Good evening, baseball fans, and welcome back to For Collectors, a channel for collectors, just like you and me. So, um, this is the second episode in what is essentially a podcast that we are doing in conjunction with the Sports Card Clubhouse. So when you see this video, you can watch the audio. You can listen to the audio on any podcast channel. I do it on Spotify. I know it's on Apple Podcasts. So. And the video will be on the Sports Card Clubhouse later on. So it's my pleasure, my absolute pleasure, to welcome in one of the, if not the greatest podcasters in the sports card arena. He has a podcast that you have to listen to. You have to be subscribed to. I am subscribed to. I've been for quite a while. It's called The Shallow End. And my guest is Iowa Dave. How are you, Dave, this evening?
Hey, Dan, good to see you. I'm doing great. I love what you and the others are doing with For Collectors. It's a real honor to be on. Thank you.
Well, when we started doing this podcast, I wanted to get what I thought were like the best voices in the sports card community on issues that are sort of, more philosophical than just showing cards or talking about, games or players or whatever. So I felt like the three top people I've asked, and they've all said yes, and you were the second one. And I did the Chris Hoge, Chris McGill, known as House of Jordans. I call him Chris Hoge. He did number one, and I'm really very happy with how that came out. So so happy that you said yes. And my third person has said yes, and I'm not going to reveal who it is, but you might be able to guess because he's been on your show before, and he's extraordinarily well spoken in the land of sports cards. So that's where we are. For the For Collectors and Sports Card Clubhouse listeners and viewers, tell us a little bit about Iowa Dave and your journey getting to where you are now.
Sure. Starting at the end, I'm mostly a St. Louis Cardinals collector now, but I also collect vintage stuff and mostly almost entirely baseball, some WNBA. I started collecting in 1983. That was the first cards I remember buying. And to this day, I think 83 Topps is my favorite top set, at least from the 80s. That's based on how that looks. And like most, I collected for about 8 years. Around 91, I got out, started doing other things. And then early COVID, got back into it. I actually started looking into it before that happened, but not to grow my collection, but to get rid of it. I was meticulous with my collection as a kid. I don't know why. I'm not even that neat of a person, but I went back over COVID to visit my dad down in St. Louis to say hi, see how you doing, and to get my cards out. They had just been sitting there for 25, 30 years. They were all labeled. They were all organized. There were top loaders. There were binders. There were boxes. And I knew that the prices were going up, and I thought, now is the time to sell them. There's nothing else going on. I'm at home. I'm working, but I'm at home. And slowly but surely, I started selling them off. Graded about 15 of them. And by sheer dumb luck, I got them in right before PSA closed. So I got them back fairly quickly. I got them back in about 7 or 8 weeks. And those magically sold off. I'm like, wow, this is an easy hobby. And then I started getting a little bit interested in it. And so I had one slab left. The last slab was the 91 Michael Jordan Upper Deck number one, the one where he's wearing the White Sox uniform. I think he's at spring training or the All-Star game or something. It's before he even retired to play baseball. And it gemmed. It got a PSA 10, which I thought that they all should get PSA 10s. I couldn't figure out the other ones. But I said to my wife, I said, hey, I'm just going to play around with this a little bit and save the money from this one card. And she's like, okay, go for it. And that was it. And I got all the way down to about one, not counting a few personal items I wanted to keep. And since then, built it right back up. And I didn't know what I was doing when I got back into it. My first card that I bought in the modern era was an Anthony Edwards base Prism Raw card because I heard that he was good. And then quickly moved back into baseball. So since then, I've been a baseball collector, and that's sort of where my heart lies. I'm from St. Louis. Baseball is a religion there. Yeah. And so baseball is mostly all that I collect.
Well, I have been to Busch Stadium. I've never talked about it, but I actually have been to Busch Stadium in 1987. And so I kind of felt like maybe a good topic listening to your stuff. I was especially loved the series you did this summer with like the mistakes people have made in the hobby. And I know Theo from Four Collectors was one of your guests, and so that kind of spurred me on thinking like, what is like a good topic to not only follow up on what I talked about last month with Chris, but also like some of the things that you've talked about lately. And I came up with this concept of letting go, and this is kind of in my sort of collection journey. I'm getting into that a little bit. I've talked about how I put all my cards into Card Ladder in the last couple months, and how I've seen how much some of them are appreciated in value, but also some of these cards that are sitting in boxes that I'm not really spending much time with. So I thought about the concept of letting go, and then I thought, like, what are the different aspects or different stages of letting go? And number one that I came up with, and I think you agreed with this, is falling out of love with a card that when you bought it, you were like, oh, this is great. I'm going to keep it. I'm going to keep it. Ends up in a box. You pull it out. You're like, I don't know, not really in love with it anymore. So do you have any thoughts on this particular issue?
I do. And I think that there are two different ways of falling out of love. I think one of them is not even being in love in the first place, but being infatuated. It seems like a good idea at the time, and you buy it, you order it, you trade for it, whatever, and it arrives, and within a week, sometimes within a minute of getting out of that package, that this was a mistake. Whatever you were thinking in that moment is not in the new moment. So I would question whether that's even love in the first place. But the second side of that is, I think, has happened to all of us. We have this part of our collection, whether it's a single card, a set, a player run, who knows what it is. And at one point, it felt like the most important thing in your hobby world. And then one day, you're looking at it and you just don't feel what you used to feel.
Yeah.
And you think, am I really feeling this way? I'm going to wait a little bit. But it just keeps sliding, right? And you realize at some point, there's something that I want more. I can put this to good use. It's not a waste of money. I don't think it's a waste of money at all. I mean, we've all bought furniture, we've all bought cars, and they've served us really well. But at some point, you move on to something else. And I think it's the same way with cards. Not all the time, but sometimes it just doesn't hit the same way. I don't know if it's a visceral thing. I don't know if it's an emotional thing. I don't know if there are some other factors that play into it. But I think it's a very real part of the hobby, which is falling in love, and then falling out of love, and then falling in love with something else.
Yeah. And different people react differently in that regard. There are cards in my collection that I don't think I'm ever going to get rid of, but you never know. There are cards that I have sold that I thought the same thing about 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. So, it's an evolution. And I think the next point that I think is kind of related to this, but it's more, I think, sort of like the concept that you're changing the focus of your collection. You see this a lot with collectors where they're a player collector, and friends of mine, Four Collectors people, have done this. They're a Hall of Fame collector, or they're a particular player collector, and then they sort of move on and they pivot to something a little bit different because of a number of reasons. But that whole concept of changing focus, and for my particular, what happened to me in the last couple of months with this whole putting my collection into Card Ladder is I realized that my Mickey Mantle cards that are sitting all the way up top there, I don't need all of them. I have the complete run from 53 Bowman all the way to 69 tops, and not all the oddballs and stuff, but I decided to sell off things like the 64 tops that I really don't like that much, the 58 tops that I really don't like that much. And they realized money since I bought them. I made a little bit of money on them, and then that money went into my card money that went into buy cards at the National or wherever I'm going at that point. So
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah,
Can I ask you
sure.
At the point when you were trying to go for the run and trying to collect them all, did it feel like an obligation, like you had to, or that you wanted to, like you wanted to have this run?
Yeah. I think in retrospect, absolutely. That I thought I loved all the Mantle cards, but I don't. Some of them I do, some of them I don't. The ones that I felt obligated to get, because you got to get the run, I mean, if you have, like many of us do, anal retentive qualities, you want the whole run. So, at some point I felt like I don't need to have the whole run. I just need to have the ones that I like. So changing focus, is that something let me know what you feel about that in terms of how
Yeah,
that comes into the whole concept of letting go.
that's such a good question because I think we all have encountered this at some point. And I have this sort of half-cocked theory about it, which I'm not even sure I believe. But I think about it like a cone with the big part of the cone is at the top, and it gets narrow the farther down that you go. And I think that the longer that you stay in the hobby, the less that you change direction. At the beginning, when you're in it, or getting back into it, you're just figuring out where you are. You just figure out what's going on. When I first got back into it, I had these wonderful memories of Don Russ and Rated Rookie. I used to love to collect the Rated Rookies when I was younger. So I started buying Don Russ baseball. And I kid you not, it was 4 or 5 months in when I looked at one day and thought, wait, why is the logo not on their hat? It took me that long to realize that these were now unlicensed cards. I was still trying to go for Rated Rookies of, the players from 2020, Dylan Carlson and some other ones. So you just have to learn and you have to make mistakes. So you very quickly realize, no, I don't want that. I don't want that. So you're changing direction and you're getting more narrow and more narrow. And then I think once you get experience and once you realize, yeah, I'm a hobby lifer at this point, you don't so much change directions as you add additional directions to it. Because by that point, you're embedded with certain things. You know what you like to a point. And then changing directions at that point is a really hard thing to do. It's a big decision to make. So I think it correlates with how long you've been back in. At that point, though, when you got to change direction, especially when your funds are limited, and we all have limited funds, you have to start making choices. And when you start having to make those choices, you realize pretty quick which cards are important to you, which areas are important to you, and which ones aren't. And then from there, that becomes the opportunity.
I did a show about 2 years ago with Greg from Midlife Cards on my own channel, my Dan's Vintage Baseball PC channel, and it's one of the most popular non-card showing episodes in my entire channel history, in large part because people like Greg, but also because we talked about narrow versus wide collecting strategies. And I know you just did something about the pratfalls of wide collecting, and I think that's kind of it was like a teaching moment for me and also a realization because I went out and wrote down everything that I was doing, every player I was collecting, every team I was collecting, all the sets I was working on. And it was like 3 pages of stuff. And I read it out at the end. And Greg was like, yeah, that's a bit of a problem, isn't it? And I feel like, transitioning from a more of a focused collector. I mean, I still have 1,000 graded cards. Mind you, I haven't gotten there yet. It's a process. But I feel like at a certain point, it brings us to number 3 on my list, which is a card has realized so much additional value since you first bought it that it'd almost be financially negligent not to sell it. I mean, is that something you've encountered? Because I certainly have, and it's been good for me.
Not just encountered, but I'm in the middle of that now. I'm right in the middle of that. I have a card right now at Fanatics that I'm consigning. I bought it about a year ago. It's an Ohtani card, and it has just skyrocketed in the last year to the point where I no longer look at the card as a card, but I look at it as something that would be borderline irresponsible to not sell at this point because of other things that I could get with it, because I would want to put some toward house stuff and home stuff as well.
Yeah.
My good friend Greg, who's paper and chrome, he's probably gotten tired of me, but I went back and forth like, should I sell it? Should I not? Should I sell it? Should I not? Should I sell it? Should I not? But he's been just so patient, and finally I said, you know what? I'm just going to keep it. And then a week later I said, oh, by the way, I sent it off. So it was such a struggle with me because it's not one that I'm going to be able to reacquire, I don't think, at some point. It's one of his rookies, not an auto, but enough that I stopped looking at it as a card and started looking at it. There's this word again, opportunity, to get other cards that I did not think were possible before, but also do more with it as well. So it's hard, right? Because I think, cards are cards until they're not. And this is not an idea I've thought a whole lot about, but just a little bit, that when they sort of cross this threshold into real life, or when your mind starts to wander and you start thinking, what can this card do for me? It's already gone at that point. When you start thinking, this card, if it was not in my collection, what else could my collection look like? Now, when I got this Ohtani, it was about a year ago. He was a great player then, he's a great player now, but it's gone up and up. There were other cards that I certainly wanted more that I could not afford. My podcast is called The Shallow End, but now I can, and this card can help me afford it. And it's not even my favorite Ohtani. It's cool, right? But there are other ones that I like more that I've since acquired that are cheaper. I like the images better. I like the stories behind them more.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, okay, it's fine. And then I'm ridiculous. I sent it off to the consignor along with about 8, 9, or 10 other cards. And then I email him, wait, can you pull it out and send it back to me? And he doesn't respond within 3 hours. I read him back, no, never mind, keep it there. And then he writes back, are you sure? And he's been so patient. He's like, are you sure? I'm like, yep, keep it there. Keep it there. You're not going to hear from me again until it's listed. 2 days later, is it too late? Yes, it's too late. Sorry, no, let it go. It's one of the more embarrassingly funny stories of getting back into the hobby because I'm so torn on the card, but it is now actually listed. And actually, I feel somewhat relieved that it's listed, but now I am staring at it. And as we are recording this, it has 8 more days to go. And I bet you I am checking 15 times a day to see if people are watching it or bidding on it. And as long as it gets to a number that I'm comfortable with, I think I will be glad. I think at this point, I'm just worried it will not be enough. And the fact that I'm thinking about it purely monetarily tells me that I'm making the right choice with this card.
Were you watching the MVP announcement on MLB?
It went live that night, right? So it was wonderful timing. So yes, I kept thinking to myself, it better not be Schwarber. It better not be Schwarber. Because I know Kyle Schwarber has the counting stats, but he doesn't have anything else. And then Schwarber ended up obviously not even being close to it, right? So and then on top of it, it got a top 15%, eye appeal sticker on it as well. Right. I actually put my fist in the air. I'm like, yes, okay, here we go. Here we go. So we'll see how it actually goes, but now I'm in my head like, oh, season's over. Now it's the off season. Now prices dip. You should have listed it 2 weeks before. It is what it is. I'm just neurotic.
Well, I obviously wish you well in that regard. My story, and it's a quick one, is before Strongsville, I actually worked a show. I do sometimes work local shows here in New York, small ones, selling cards, selling, off my extras and stuff. And but I made a sacrifice. I had a 1915 Crackerjack Mordecai 3-finger Brown card that I had purchased for, 3 digits, and it was now a mid 4-digit card. And I love the card. I want the card, but I said to myself, this is the card that I have the most realized gain. And it's gone up 100%. So I brought that with me, and I brought my Ty Cobb bat on shoulder T206, which was, I had kind of fallen out of love into it because the condition was just not that great. It was like, I got a Ty Cobb like 2-3 years ago. It was a big deal for me, but then it just wasn't the one. And I sold both of them. I made enough money to go to Strongsville and buy my Ty Cobb red portrait, which I love and I will have forever. Card. So I felt like, I made a sacrifice, and I would love to have that, Crackerjack card again. But, Crackerjacks are increased in value significantly in the last few years. And, that was the one that I could afford. It didn't really fit any particular part of my collection.
So it covered your trip and allows you to get the Cobb that is now part of your forever collection.
Exactly. So I felt like that was a good one. That's a good example of how you can let go. It's a little hard sometimes, but it can be rewarding in the end. So the next one that I came up with was this whole concept of thinning the herd, a phrase that I picked up and I didn't make up. I heard it from Leighton Shelton several years ago, and he, basically had a whole series of discussions about it. And I thought to myself, years later, I'm now thinking of this concept because of the amount of cards that I have that are too many to fit in my card room, and just too many. And the whole concept of thinning the herd, I've been going through and picking out cards that don't fit my collection necessarily, don't really do what I thought they were going to do for me. Maybe they were impulse buys, whatever it was that got me this card into my collection. I now am ready to thin out, and I'm doing some of that also. So I have a stack of slabs that I can bring to my next show that I'm working at, and I want to go from 1,000 down to a significantly less than 1,000 graded cards in my collection. So thinning the herd, is that a concept that you understand? Obviously you understand it, but it's a concept that you sort of buy into. And do you have any experience with that concept?
100%. And my collection has been thinned already.
Yeah.
It was out of necessity. And I'll try not to belabor this too much because I've told the story so much and don't want to bore anyone. But some early 2024, I decided I finally wanted to go for the Leaf Jackie Robinson rookie. And, of course I didn't have the funds for it. But what I could do is I could start moving inventory for it. And by the way, there's the card.
Yes.
Beautiful. Right. So I ended up, end of the story is I pick one up 45 minutes after being at the 2024 National in Cleveland. And then I was out of money for the next 3 days. Right. But I ended up having to move. I think the exact number was 92% of my slabs in order to be able to get into this card. But I was at a different point with this card. I thought if I don't have this card, I don't even necessarily want to collect. To me, it was the root card. It was the beginning card. It was a card that it was like the seed of which everything else would grow out of my collection. So everything else, almost everything else became expendable. And so the thing, and at that point, I almost had to start over. Because once I got the card, I had maybe 4 slabs, and then my binder cards, which are, fun and $1 here, a couple of dollars there. But I had already thinned. And if you like the royal you, if someone is thinking about thinning and if it can be freeing, if it's worth it, I can't speak for the individual, but I can speak for myself that I've managed to stay focused since then. We're going on about 1.5 years since the 24 National, and every card that I get that is beyond a certain price amount I have to be really deliberate about. But now when I go to move things, like I sent some things to consignment, it's so much harder because I feel so much more connected to everything, and everything within my collection feels connected to everything else. Part of it too is I'm just someone who is a bit of a minimalist anyway. I don't like to have a lot of stuff. I found out the hard way and the long waste of time way that I'm not a completionist, or I like to complete things, but I don't like to have it once I've completed it. I've made a couple of big runs. I've completed a couple of sets. And within days of me having completed it, I start thinking about something else and I'm willing to move on from it. I thought that was a really unhealthy way to collect because I'm wasting my time, I'm wasting my money. And instead, I think about it in terms of cards like pairings and history involved. And, my kids are not old enough to have their own kids yet. But one question that I always ask myself, I'm a little bit astray here and I apologize, is when I pick cards up now, it is what, if I'm lucky enough to have grandkids, what can this card teach them? If they sit down next to me and I show them, whether it's Jackie Robinson or Bob Gibson or Red Shandies or Shohei Ohtani, we can tell these stories about them. But that all started because I had to trim the fat. I had to trim it all. And not because I thought, time to trim it, but that I have to because I want this Jackie Robinson card. But once I got down to that almost that bare minimum and could start over, it was just like to be able to actually have that reset. It was freeing.
The other thing that I've come to realize is that, especially when it comes to cards like 50s, 60s, anything after that, is that there's no rarity. And so if you sell the card, you can get it back. I know a friend of ours, another 4 collector, who sold his Tom Seaver rookie card because he needed the funds for another card, which was a great move for him. But then he felt bad and he went out and bought another Tom Seaver rookie card because even a short print like that, you can get another one. It's not going to disappear off the face of the earth. When it comes to the rare pre-war stuff, that's a little bit more of an issue that I come up against.
100%. I'm sorry, I almost cut you off there. I apologize. One of the cards that I had to get rid of to get the Jackie was a 54 Red Heart Musial. And it killed me because it was just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And then about, I don't know, 6 months ago, I was able to reacquire one and I just moved it again. It's like you can't fall back in love. I never thought of it, but you can't fall back in love. And and the thing is I realized I couldn't be, and everything else who I'm trying to collect, I couldn't collect everyone, right? You know, recently on an episode of The Shallow End had on Aaron, who was collect like a champion, and he said, I realized, or I knew I couldn't collect everything. Yeah. And Musial was me trying to collect everything. Me being from St. Louis, having met him a few times at things when I was growing up, I thought, oh, I'm gonna, collect these Musial cards because I met him and because I knew him and he's from St. Louis. But I got rid of the card, and I still met him, and I still got to know him. Not to know him, but I got to meet him a couple of times. Like, the memories don't go away just because the cards go away. But if I want to add more Jackie Robinsons to my collection, then there's no room for the Musial because I don't just have a money tree outside.
Right. Which brings us, and we had you are in our exchange. You had a couple of points to add to it, and one of which is the concept of real life financial obligations. And there was a point, I don't know, maybe 4 years ago, where I needed, at the time, a quick $600-700, and for real life expense, I don't know what it was, probably something to do with the kids needed something, and so I sold my Sinella Babe Ruth, a card that I just had because I wanted a playing days Babe Ruth. The one I really wanted is the one I have behind me now, which is the 33 Gaudy Red, but it was a placeholder, and I thought to myself, I have a $600 or $700 placeholder card. That's the card that I can afford to move, so I can get the $600, give it to my wife, and buy whatever we needed to buy in that situation for one of our kids. And I felt like I've got so much money invested in cards that I felt almost guilty that like it was a piece of cardboard up on the wall that really should have been a pair of whatever that one of the kids needed. So real life money is important, and I don't think it gets talked about enough. And I think you made a great point when you brought that up in our conversation.
Yeah, I always feel really, my heart always feels kind of warm if I'm going through Instagram, and if I see somebody say something like, it's January and our water heater broke, having a story sale. I feel bad that they're missing their cards, but I'm almost, I don't want to say joyful, but I'm grateful that they can just sell cards and do it, because that way they don't have to take out a loan, or they don't have to, refi, or they don't have to dip into some sort of savings. It's really kind of nice when somebody is willing to do that. A couple of years ago at the 23 National, which was my first national, it was in Chicago, I was able to pick up a 2017 Bowman Chrome Ohtani and a BGS 10. I traded some Nolan Arenado cards for it. I mentioned before how once I get a run, I want to get rid of it. Well, I completed this Nolan Arenado run, and I was like, well, now what do I do? So I went to the National, and I basically traded it for this Ohtani. And then, it's a little bit before that, my daughter was looking at my computer and dumped chocolate milk all over it, and then didn't tell me. My laptop didn't tell me for like 2 days. By the time it was in, it had set. Everything was sticky. It couldn't be repaired. I took it. And then, so for a few months, I had all my personal stuff also on my work computer, my laptop, which you just shouldn't do and you can't do, but I was storing everything there. And so I took the Ohtani and I sold it, and I bought a new computer, and it hurt. It hurt. I was mad, and I still wish I had that card, because now it's worth like 4 times as much after this run. But at least I didn't have to go charge a computer,
The solution for this, and I have this Group Me. I don't know if you know Group Me. It's like just a way to have a chat with. Sure. It's, I don't know, probably about 20 guys, and we've all known each other for a while now, and they're all different kinds of collectors. And one guy, he needed a new furnace or a roof or whatever it was, and he wanted to sell his cards, but he's like, when I get the money back, I want to buy these back. Oh. Anybody want to do this? And we were like, yeah, okay. I'll take a $200-300 card for 6 months or whatever. And some of it he didn't want back, some of it he sold back, and it became a situation where it was almost like, yeah, you can have these for a while, but I'll buy them back from you. And that happens. I mean, this is a group of guys, and that's one of the great things about the hobby, which is really not part of this conversation, but if you get a group around you, if you get your tribe, things like that can happen. And so, people constantly looking out for me. This, I don't have it actually in front of me because I'm going to do a show about it, but this, here it is right here. This 1948 World Series ticket was sold to me for a fraction of its value by one of my friends in that group because he knew I wanted one of those. And so, it's like he bought two, he sold me one for a fraction, and I got it graded, and it's great. And I'm going to do a show on it pretty soon. But it's one of those things where people look out for you. And so, I'm a little off topic now. I know that, but it's a story that I really like to talk about because it's one of those things where, people can help each other out. And if you need the money, you sell the card and maybe even you get it back. So
I love that. Just being able to have that support, it means so much.
So the final point for yours, and I'll read it from what you said if you don't mind. It's the sacrifice. You've fallen out of love with it. You haven't fallen out of love with it, but you have a limited card budget. And sometimes the only way to get new cards is to move current cards. Certain pain and potential regret that comes with the option. It's not a matter of falling out of love, but rather which do you love more? And I love this because this is a real thing that I see all the time amongst collectors. I love this card, let's say a 67 Seaver rookie, but I know that there's a Mathewson or a Mays, one-off out there that I could get as a result of this. So let me do this. I haven't fallen out of love with it, but you have to make choices. And so I think this is really kind of the best way to describe the concept of what I wanted to do with this podcast. Is to talk about all the different versions of letting go and how you can kind of deal with it, in your collection and in your life and have it mean something in the long run. So tell me what was going through your head when you sent that little bit of brilliance to me.
Well, I mentioned before that I've got some cards at consignment right now. And part of that is because my collection had gotten too broad for my liking. It was probably 88% baseball and 12% women's basketball. But in that women's basketball, I was collecting 20 different players, and that was just too many. And it doesn't mean that I didn't like them, any of them. They all were bought with a deliberateness that I thought that I needed. And I also had some baseball cards that I was trying to move as well. And there was a number of Otanis. I mentioned the Musial, some other vintage cards as well. And I had them out and I was looking at them, and it was the weirdest feeling. I felt like I was on like The Bachelor and I was picking like who I liked the most, and it was kind of picking them. I'm like, okay, well, first round draft pick is Jackie Robinson. He's not going anywhere. This couple of cards I have from my parents that belonged to them when they were kids, like that's not going anywhere. So who's got to go somewhere? Well, then I narrow it down to, okay, I'm going to keep these vintage, which vintage are not staying, and then had to kind of go away. And all the cards that I gave away, it kind of felt like a kick in the gut to some degree, which told me though, which was a signal, not that I should not have gotten rid of them, but that I was right to get them in the first place. Because even as I was moving them, I still had, sounds like a relationship, I still had some feelings for them, right? But still getting them into that package and sending it off to whoever was going to consign or sell or whatever, it was just felt good because the cards that were left, I could now focus more on. And with the cards that I had gotten rid of, I could then add more to those more narrow sections of my collection. I wanted to have more, and I still want to have more Jackie Robinson. I have this daydream of an ending point to my collection, and people have never said they never have an ending point, but I do envision one almost where I have his 8 playing days cards plus his Bond bred portrait from 47. And then once I collect those 9 Jackies, I always feel like I would be done. Like that would be the end of the book for me. Now, I mean, that could be a decade from now. It could be 2 decades from now. But if I'm not moving toward that, then what am I really moving toward? I'm just buying and selling and just sort of randomly paddling in a circle. And so, and getting rid of them, the cards that I got rid of, I even now there's some that I'm thinking about where it's like, should I have done that? Yeah, probably so. But there actually is one that I have Fanatics collect, and my consignor actually shipping back to me because I started thinking of that. Oh, my kid actually likes this player. And what would she think if I just sold it for a few bucks, right? So I got it back. Yeah. But you can't love everything,
Yeah.
or you can, but I shouldn't anyway. And now I'm excited to see where I can go with, for a new Jackie after this is all settled here in about a month.
Well, I'm actually letting go of a Jackie. I have a 55, and I'm not in love with it. I like the card. I don't think it's his best card, but it's just the condition is not to my liking, and I feel like it's kind of a combination of a bunch of these things. It's not like a falling out of love with it, but it's one of those ones that I think the money that could, and it lost its spot up here because I picked up a new card that went into that area of the shelf. So it's almost like, here's two things that can happen to this Jackie card. It could either be sold for an amount of money that would realize me some profit from what I paid for it, and then I could put that money into something else, or it'll sit in a box underneath my desk or over here in the corner, and I won't even look at it. And so maybe it's more useful. And this is part of the whole, part of the reason I wanted to do this and bring you on, because I knew you were going to have thoughts like this. I knew you were going to nail it. And it's because at some point, you can't have everything. You can't love everything. You can't collect every card of every player. You can't do all the move-ons. At some point, you got to let go. And letting go is important. It's hard to do. Sometimes it's easier than others, but it's hard to do in totality. And at some point, we all got to do it. So let's deal with it, right? Let's take that problem on right at his head. And
if I could stick with your real quick, if I could stick with your idea, the 55 Jackie, and what is a better life for that card stuck in that box you talked about, somewhere, or somebody else who maybe just wanted to have their first Jackie. My first Jackie was a 55. It was an SGC 1.5, paid $85 for it. But then it was in brutal shape. But then as the Jackie prices crept up a couple of years ago, I think I sold it for $140. But because I wanted something else and I knew that was not the right Jackie for me. But now by moving on from it, you've potentially given someone their first Jackie, and now they get honored.
Didn't even think about that. The concept that somebody is going to love this card, and it is a card that you can love. And when I bought it at the 22 National in Atlantic City. And I remember who I bought it from, and I remember the whole deal, and there's no negativity towards that, and it has a good memory for me. But yeah, I've moved on from that collector. That collector that went to the 22 National I'm a different person from that now. And so I feel like you're absolutely right. Somebody is going to get that card and they're going to be, wow, I have a Jackie Robinson card. And that's cool. And that's really good. And that's sort of like not just thinning the herd or moving your cards along or letting go, but, helping somebody else realize some love for something. So I think that's a great way for us to finish. Thank you.
Yeah, this has been just so much fun and therapeutic, and I just love could be talking cards forever. So this has been just a wonderful opportunity. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, Dave, thank you so much. Like I said, I wanted to get the best voices in the hobby in the first few of these. And, I feel like I'm so happy you said yes. I'm so happy you came on, and I'm so happy that you nailed it on every one of those questions. So thank you so much, Dave. I will continue to listen to you. You do a fantastic job, and I'm so thankful that you are, in fact, a voice in the hobby because you're valuable to all of us. So I appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. Keep up your great work too, please. I value all that you do.
Thank you. So, listeners, we will be back next month with another podcast that will jointly go in for collectors and the Sports Card Clubhouse. I have another terrific voice in the hobby. So really looking forward to that. So thank you for tuning in, and take care.